when you have two emotions, and things like joy and gratitude will always win out. They just do. That's the way our design
Good,
is.
Joan.
Hi. Hello.
We need to do some muting, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying.
So those tools that we have,
Yeah, so that's where the 1,000.
Joan, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, I'm trying to get them.
Let's not see the red, but let's see. All right, what would you like to do? By the A?
I'm sorry for the delay.
Yeah, that's it.
An interruption. Thank
Okay. Still ups. Ups. Sorry.
you too.
Yeah, there we go. Go ahead.
I was going to say that this whole COVID situation is temporary. Whether it's weeks or months or however long it is, there will be a medical solution, and we will be able to get back to a different kind of life than we're having to live now. But during that wait, during that temporary time, we really need tools with which to persist. And Amy is a marvelous model of how to use those tools. So I'd like to pass the baton on now to Rabbi David Meyer. Rabbi Meyer and Temple Emmanuel, over which he presides, have been really important anchors for Amy along her healing journey. And so I'm going to turn this over to him. David?
Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be part of this conversation tonight with you, Harvey, Amy, Ben, Terry, everybody. And I love the way that you use the word anchors, because I'd like to pursue that idea right now. A few days ago, during one of my High Holy Day messages, I spoke about a visit to Toronto that Marla and I took some years ago when we had the chance to take a side trip to visit Niagara Falls. So although there are obviously very violent rapids within viewing distance of the falls themselves, further upstream, the river's current flows a lot more gently, and boats are really able to navigate pretty well. I was interested to learn when I was there that just before the Welland River empties into the Niagara, there's a pedestrian walkway that spans the river. And posted on this bridge is a warning sign for boaters. The sign reads in big block letters, "Do you have an anchor? Do you know how to use it?" So here we are, not knowing that those turbulent times were going to be ahead of us when we're in very profound need of such an anchor or anchors, and likewise the wisdom to know how to use it. Now, in our Jewish tradition, there is a prayer that we recite during the High Holy Day season. It's called Unetane Tokef, and it's kind of a listing of all these different ways you might, if I could be so cavalier, meet your maker. And there's all a listing of things that might happen. And it really is a way of saying, hey, we don't know what's going to be around that next bend in the river. There could be turbulent waters. There could be Niagara Falls. And it tells us that there are three significant anchors that we should turn to in order to stabilize us, in order to allow us to survive and come up from these turbulent times. And in the prayer, it gives the words tefillah, supplication, teshuvah, renewal, and tzedakah, charity. Well, in other words, reaching upward to find inspiration, that is prayer. Looking inward to repair our brokenness, and reaching outward to respond to the needs of the world around us. Those can be our anchors when we come across unexpected turbulent times. Upward for inspiration or prayer, inward for repairing ourselves, tshuva, and outward to respond to the needs of the world around us. So for Amy, and reading your work, Amy, in your book, I think I see all three of those directions of reaching that helped you get to where you are now, and bring the message of hope that we're going to really focus on. Rather than necessarily prayer, but reaching upward, for you it was music. And music continues to be a way in which you are able and have enabled others to reach upward for that inspiration. In fact, that your book is divided in chapters based on musical compositions and lyrics expresses that very beautifully. The second part, which is reaching inward for renewal, you've done through therapy with ongoing wonderful helpers, teachers, therapists, counselors, and you speak about some of them who've really helped guide your way. And the third is in our prayer is tzedakah, or charity. And clearly you also speak about how volunteering, reaching out in community efforts, and thank goodness for those of us at Temple Emmanuel that we have been the recipient of so many countless hours, weeks, months, years of time, but not just us, around the community. And you've also modeled that reaching out for others and actually be a source of healing for ourselves, maybe one of the best ways to do it. Now, of course, Amy's journey was hers alone to travel, as it is for each of us. No two such journeys are alike, but we can learn from and inspire one another, which is the main reason why she wrote her very brave and honest memoir. In a moment, I know that Amy's going to bring us along through the pain and then into the hope. And I would conclude my words of appreciation with verses from the artist and writer Joanne Fink. This is what she wrote. Each step of our journey leaves an indelible mark on our souls. The challenges you've been facing have forced you to grow in ways you might never have imagined before everything changed, before the curveball rocked your world, before your life veered unexpectedly towards an unknown destination, before you became so weary you weren't sure you could take another step, before you began to open your heart to possibility, before you discovered that love makes the journey worthwhile. And now you stand here at the crossroads of your old life and the person you are becoming. Celebrate the opportunity to re-envision your life's purpose. The time will come for your soul to soar. Transition leads to transformation, and you are on the path to wholeness. Thanks, everybody.
Amy?
Wow. Wow. I'm so moved. I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us this evening. I'm Amy Saltz, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm going to read my presentation. It'll make it better for me so I'm already kind of nervous, but that'll help. Okay. So I wrote my first book An Essential Song in 2018. It was a metaphorical story of love, loss, reclamation, and healing. The support for An Essential Song gave me the courage to write the comprehensive nonfiction version as my second book, Finding the Song, Living After Attempting Suicide. It was published in late January of this year and printed in mid-February. There was a book launch scheduled for March 30th at Temple Emmanuel with Marblehead Counseling Center. Of course, the pandemic came in early March and all group activities were canceled. Since that time, I began to feel diminished. What could I possibly offer at a time like this? Is my book applicable or relevant now? I'd worked so hard on it and felt such a sense of loss. My 60th birthday was on March 17th. It was the first birthday of my life that I was actually looking forward to. Family was coming from out of state to be with me. My partner, Patty, and I had tickets to a play at Marblehead Little Theater. We had plans to take the kids to Hestia for ceramics. All this was canceled, and I spent the day isolated. Again, I felt a sense of loss. I noticed that I was discounting these losses. They didn't seem to measure up compared to what was happening in the world around us. I was invalidating myself. Plus, the pandemic was causing me to have intense flashbacks multiple times a day of being in agony, unable to breathe on a ventilator when I was a teenager. I needed to find compassion and validation for myself. An alarm rang inside my head and my heart that led me back to my book. When I reread Finding the Song, Living After Attempting Suicide during the pandemic, I noticed that there are some healing strategies and lessons I learned that can apply to today's challenges and maybe provide some hope. As an adult, I hold firmly to the belief that we can recover emotionally from just about anything if we're treated with compassion and given validation. As a youth in my early teens, I reached out for help and got debilitating invalidation in a hospital setting, which brought crushing shame and despair that ultimately caused me to try to take my life. I was a kid. What I did took a few seconds. It has resulted in a lifetime with a myriad of complications. It did not feel like a choice. It was a tragedy. I'd been reaching out and trying to receive help. I was disintegrating, and then I completely broke apart. It was overwhelming to lose myself back then. And that feeling seems present for lots of us today. I had always sought healing, but unfortunately was harmed in the process when I was young. It wasn't until decades later, after my soulmate Leon died, when I found a bereavement counselor named Judy Seifert to help me with this loss, that I was given the opportunity to share all of the other losses with an enlightened witness. Judy truly heard me and validated me with undying compassion and without judgment. She gave me life. She taught me about disenfranchised grief, which is grief that is not acknowledged by society. She believed that disenfranchised grief applied to the significant losses in my life. She helped me understand trauma and accompanied me to sessions with trauma specialist Sandra Finney. The word trauma being applied to my experiences was a breakthrough for me, the ultimate validation and corroboration that my actions were not chosen. Prior to this, I couldn't let go of self-blame for the tragic mistake I'd made. I think all of us are feeling trauma and loss now in so many ways. If we have a history of trauma and loss, this feels magnified exponentially. Let's stop for a minute and allow ourselves to acknowledge the significance of our endurance. It's hard to reach out now because we understand that all of us are struggling. But if we do allow ourselves to reach out, perhaps we can help people feel a sense of purpose by being of use to others. We can try with intention to give compassion to ourselves and to those around us. One helpful lesson I taught myself that I'm eager to impart to you is this: compare oneself only to oneself. As a result of my suicide attempt, I suffered severe oral burn damage, lost most of my tongue, then was hospitalized for years with a feeding tube and underwent skin grafting. No surgeries could restore my tongue, and I was told that I might never be able to talk or eat by mouth and would likely be institutionalized for life. I lost so much that I felt as if I could never catch up to my peers. Instead of trying to do so, I tried to give myself credit for my efforts to stay alive and to teach myself basic functions like talking and eating, although difficult and limited. Compared to how I'd been, I was a superhero. There are immeasurable benefits that accompany comparing oneself only to oneself. I believe it teaches self-encouragement, gratitude, compassion, and trust in oneself. With what's happening now, lots of us are compromised and must do what we can to stay safe. With the serious decisions all of us face now, being able to trust ourselves and not compare ourselves to what other people feel comfortable doing allows us to care wholeheartedly for ourselves. I believe our efforts are admirable. The next strategy I devised is a way of approaching life that I coined creative compensation. It's finding alternative methods to offset what can't be done in the usual way. There were lots of things I couldn't do like other people, so I taught myself to accept my limitations and to find other ways of doing similar things. For example, I couldn't read like everyone else because of having had brain damage from encephalitis as a child. So I learned in original ways that worked for me, even from song lyrics. I didn't force myself to do things that weren't possible for me. Instead, I enhanced the skills that felt comfortable to me and learned by doing. Before you knew it, I was a calligrapher, an accountant, a librarian, a mahjong teacher, a projectionist, a percussionist, and an author. I found ways to be in the world and to give of myself in spite of my limitations. With remarkable physician Harvey Zarin's invitation, I presented seminars at North Shore Medical Center Schwartz Rounds, Tufts Medical School Department of Psychiatry, and Mass General Hospital Psychology Training Program, promoting compassion for individuals who've attempted suicide. That creative compensation is in full gear now as well. I've been utilizing it to do activities in new ways from home, including work for my clients and volunteer projects. These endeavors furnish both structure and meaning while being isolated. As I reread my book, I realized that my experience of having my former husband Leon die without being able to be physically with him and then not being able to have a funeral is being replicated for so many people with their loved ones during the pandemic. There were some rituals I was able to implement that helped me immensely. I'd like to share some of these with you in case they can be helpful to you and those you love. The Marblehead Reporter allowed me to place an obituary for Leon. I also bought a bench at Seaside Park where we used to play. This was the closest thing I could find to resemble a gravesite or a cemetery. The plaque reads, "In loving memory of Leon Wiesel and our joy together." On the 2-year anniversary of Leon's death, my newly found bereavement counselor, Judy, suggested that we have a ceremony to commemorate Leon. I had some of his ashes. We scattered a portion of them at the ocean, and the rest were kept in a beautiful vase in the condo where we lived together. Years later, a storm with blustery winds caused a large limb of the tree next to Leon's memorial bench to break off and smash the bench. Both the tree and the bench were removed. When I called the park department, I ascertained that the plaque had been salvaged. When I went to pick it up, I inquired about having the bench replaced. They told me that the warranty had expired and it was very expensive to purchase a new one. They proposed rebuilding the bench using the broken pieces. I replied that I loved that idea. That was my life. When I sat on the new old bench after it was installed, I could see and feel our joy. After years of working to understand what happened with Leon, I'd reached peace for both of us. The bench held all the broken pieces with love. When my bereavement counselor Judy retired, we planned our final session. It would be held at the seashore where we scattered Leon's ashes. We'd collect rocks from the beach and write some chosen words on them with indelible ink. Then we'd toss them into the ocean for Leon. I got a leaf on the temple's tree of life and designed a handmade replica for Judy, in deep appreciation for the work of love and healing brought to Amy Saltz by Judy Seifert and Leon Wiesel. These rituals aren't the same as a funeral, a shiva, or a wake, but they're available to us and can provide some comfort and lasting memory. I think the feeling of being disconnected is what can lead a person to suicide. The alienation and loneliness associated with feeling disconnected can be catastrophic. To me, the sense of connection is the antidote to hopelessness. With it can come meaning, joy, and gratitude, even in the face of loss. Possibly because of my yearning to heal and the years I devoted to doing so, I learned how to stay in relationship with those who are no longer physically present on Earth. In addition, lots of my loved ones who are alive reside in other states. Since my physical limitations prevent me from traveling with or without a pandemic, I've learned ways to stay close without being physically together in the same space and to feel grateful for the connection in whatever ways we can find. Phoning, texting, using FaceTime, emailing, Zooming, watching movies at the same time and then calling to discuss them when they're over, coloring at the same time and then sharing photos of our pages, sending handcrafted greeting cards, and most of all, holding dear ones in my heart, are techniques that have helped tremendously during the pandemic. One of the most challenging aspects for me as a person who attempted suicide has been the message that has often been conveyed, that I'm a bad person because of what I did to myself. Believe it or not, feeling like a bad person may have been what helped me find connection. That's what led me to volunteer at the temple. Somehow I felt that this could be the place where I could feel like a good person if I did mitzvot, which are good deeds. Years passed with lots of mitzvot, but it wasn't until after my second soulmate, Ben, died that I saw a transformation. Leon had died suddenly and tragically. Ben died holding my hand. I could simply grieve this time. The synagogue was like a second home to me. Throughout Ben's illnesses and dying, I continued to do the projects presented to me years ago. Those tasks were all done as an individual. After Ben died, I seemed to possess an eagerness for connection. I branched out to organize activities with groups of people. I started the Mahjong program at the temple, initiated a monthly movie night, and became chairperson of the music neighborhood. Eureka! I was no longer doing volunteer work to offset my feeling like a bad person. I'd found community. When the pandemic hit, I felt the rug being pulled out from under me. I could no longer be with people and do the things that helped me feel connected. Then a most enlightening realization came to me. The bonds I'd developed are a permanent part of me and seem to foster resilience. I figured out ways to resume the activities from home with apps like Zoom and some creativity. It's not the same, but it does give us the opportunity to connect, just like we're doing now. Let's celebrate that. Being isolated has also taught me to seek joy, to establish a new routine, and to try to live in the moment without taking things for granted. I've been exercising, coloring, doing puzzles, binge watching shows, playing lots of Mahjong and Words with Friends on the apps, using my roll-up electronic drum kit, and listening to music with utmost gratitude. Let me end with a passage from my book. Leon and I used to visit my ailing grandmother in the nursing home on a regular basis. I told Leon that I wouldn't want to wind up in a place like that. He said that he wouldn't mind being there because he could still have his music. He had something that I didn't have back then. He had something that I didn't have back then, gratitude for what is here in the moment. He recognized that music is a life force to hold us and to behold. He knew its amazing capacity to unite with the soul. Ben had the very same awareness. Along with the tools I previously mentioned, as I trace my pursuit of healing in the context of my relationship with music, I am awestruck by the way music has reached me. Almost everything I've learned can be expressed by sharing how it became actualized through music. Before the pandemic, when at a concert with my present-day partner, Patty, tears of gladness trickled down my cheeks. I was alive and with a loving partner. We were still here, and music would always be here for us. It had been here all along. Nothing could take it away. It would be inside me no matter what. Its availability seemed to be like that of the sky, ever-changing and ever-present. I could feel the wholeness of life in the song, the tragedy, the loss, the healing, the love. I was overcome with a sense of gratitude and a oneness with the souls who'd given me life and love. Not only had I found the song, I was singing it. I am trying as hard as I can now to stay alive and continue singing. The song endures with hope.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you for sharing. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
As all of you know, we are all muted, but we all felt the power of your story. So thank you so very much for sharing. Because it is hope. It presents us with the idea that through adversity, we can still find moments, joy, and hopefulness. And this is an important thing to continue to celebrate and to continue to appreciate. I know many of you may have some questions, and at the bottom of your screen is a chat section. If you want to, you can type in a question to Terry McDonough, and she will collate them and answer if anyone has any questions or things they'd like to bring up. Because of the nature of so many people online, we really can't have individual questions coming out by voice. So we have to accept that that's the only real way to do it. What have we heard tonight? We heard about creative compensation, a sense of connection and gratitude for the moments in our lives that brought us joy. I think by focusing in on these issues and on these ideals, we're able to move forward in a sense of hopefulness, knowing that this will come to an end, and we will be better and stronger at the other end if we can focus on those things that bring us joy and joyfulness. Terry, do you have any things that people are coming in with?
Yes, so Amy, thank you. It was so beautiful to hear your story and just how much you've done in our community. You're such a treasure, so thank you first and foremost. Any plans for a third book?
I don't know.
I know. It's the two were so different and so beautiful, each of their own. But I know we all love to see what you produce.
Thanks.
So another one that has come through is, how do we find ways to manage anger when we see people's behavior that will potentially extend the pandemic? And I don't know if that's one that that you want to take, Amy, or if other folks want to jump in. Harvey, Ben, feel free. Rabbi, I think that was to the whole group.
For me, I just try to take care as I can for the world and for myself. I wear my mask every time I go out, and I try my best. It's really hard. The one thing I do outside is ride my bike. I do it with my mask, but when people are walking with masks, I have to get the distance. You have to be in the street further into the driving. And sometimes they don't give me that 1 second to go around the person, and they honk really, which is kind of scary, because that when cyclists, when somebody honks loudly, it can kind of scare you. But anyway, I feel like there's nothing I don't really want to say to people because I'm a little frightened, to be honest.
Thank you.
Somebody might be able to do something more.
Yeah, any other thoughts on that when you see folks who are maybe not, honoring the things that we feel might help keep us safe? Ben or Harvey, would you want to weigh in on that?
One of the things that I hold in mind is that most anger ends up coming from fear. And when I see behaviors that are nonsensical or silly or just don't make sense in light of what we know in terms of prevention and preventing the spread of this virus, I look at what I'm afraid of and I try to respond appropriately. I've found that most people who are behaving in ways that I might not think are reasonable at this time don't respond to reason. And it's true even of people who are under the sway of others, that you can't reason with people. You can't sit and have a conversation and expect them to change. What needs to happen more is some form of empathy where you try to connect with that person and develop some kind of a connection that enables you to understand more where they're coming from, and then perhaps they can understand where you're coming from. But I also know that at this time, depending on fatigue levels, what else is going on in my life, what I'm hearing on television or listening to, the things that my patients discuss about struggles and strains in their life, my own window of tolerance can shrink. And I have to be aware of that. And sometimes I just step away. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just move away and take myself out of the situation before I say or do something that I would really not feel good about.
And echoing that, a lot of times what we have to do is model the behavior that we want to see. And so while it might feel good in the moment to challenge someone, as Harvey was saying, that doesn't in and of itself change that behavior with that person. So if we're contained, if we can feel comfortable about what we're doing and allow for the fact that there's not always going to be, it's like driving in a car and someone's doing 85 miles in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, we can honk at them, we can be angry about it, but at the end of the day, we still have to do our 25 miles an hour, and they're going to do their 85, and that's just the way it's going to be. Stay contained, feel the facts that they may not understand, but we understand. And that's sharing that understanding without anger and rancor is probably the only safe and effective way to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I had another question. How do you deal with the utter loneliness?
I can take that one. I feel, for me, I think to myself, the one thing we're all given, every single one of us, there's one thing, and it's time. We don't know how long we're going to have, but while we have this time, try to find the things, even if you are all alone, even if you're isolated, find something that you like, that makes you laugh or gives you meaning, even if by yourself, if it be a book or music or a show or a pet or just it doesn't matter what it is. Those minutes, that gives you something to look forward to. It doesn't take away the looks and the connections, but it helps you with yourself. It helps you within. And I feel that for I could ever connected to the world, I had to feel whole within myself. I had to feel comfortable in my own skin. But skin graft, I needed to feel comfortable. That's work that can be done, and it can be done in the pandemic. And if there's anything that you do in your life that's meaningful, that's helping that, try to help that with your loneliness. Try to remind yourself, I'm helping that person. I did a good deed today. Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
I could add a little bit also. There's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Solitude is choice to be alone, where one gets time to think and feel and observe things that we might not otherwise. And many of us have forgotten about solitude. Our lives are so noisy, particularly before the pandemic. And they can be noisy now, but now there's more of a choice. I can turn off the television. And I find, from my definition of spirituality, is connection to self, others, all living things, nature, and the divine. And in that solitude, in that opportunity of quiet, which my professional life has very little of, I'm able to observe and see things and make connections that I otherwise might not. I might just feel connected to a flower or a plant or a tree. I might sit down and think about what's bigger than I am out in you know, what bigger thing is there that might be organizing life in some way. I don't know, but I normally, when I'm very busy around others, I don't have time to think about those things. I'm dealing with often other people's needs or whatever. So solitude for me is an opportunity to grow and stretch inwardly. And again, it's one of the things that I've found easier to do during this pandemic time. And again, it's temporary. I know I keep holding on, it's temporary, and it will be.
And what are some of the practical ways of connecting to community when our world's split both by COVID and so many other things going on in the world? I think, Amy, you've been a really good coach today, I heard, tutoring folks about Zoom. So
yeah.
you may have some volunteer title in your future. But any other practical tools, you know, in addition to getting together like this?
Well, we're very fortunate that we live in a time when we can connect online in any number of ways, whether it be a Zoom program or on Facebook or YouTube. And just during the past holiday season, I know that people were, I'm going to use the word shul hopping, going from service to service to service. You know, you want a big service, you want Park Avenue Synagogue, you want a smaller service and come to Temple Emmanuel. There were lots of ways to do that. But likewise, every organization that I know is offering online classes, seminars, gatherings, And yes, it's in little boxes most often, but there still is a connection. I hope you feel it tonight. We have 93 people here sharing a conversation that's hopefully a way of breaking through the barriers that we're required to observe right now, and I would take advantage of it. Still being remote, yes, and we can't hug like we normally would want to, but we can exchange ideas, we can exchange smiles, we can share in some learning, we can share in cultural events. Take advantage of it, and if you're not comfortable yet with connecting through Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, there are people around to help. There are people around to help in the community, and I think that it's a blessing, a silver lining, as it were, in the midst of this time. And in some ways, there are advantages to connecting with one another in a more intimate way here than if you're sitting in a hall with 100 other people. If we were 100 people, in the counseling center or what have you, we probably wouldn't be able to see each other quite as well. We may not be able to hear each other quite as well. So take advantage of these technologies, I think.
And
There's
can I
another,
add?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, well, I was going to say, you want to go, Harvey, and then I'll go?
I was just going to say that one way to connect that we don't think about is when we're feeling a little bit not so good or even overwhelmed. One way to connect is to reach out. Call someone, speak to someone, and it could be the counseling center. It could be a crisis hotline, but it could be a friend or a relative who may be in California, someone that you really are connected to, but you don't see often. You might pick up a phone or pick up Facebook or a FaceTime, or one of the things, reach out and make a connection. I think one of the things we don't understand as human beings is in our design, we are designed to be altruistic, to help one another, because our ancient ancestors survived best in groups. And sometimes when we reach out, we give someone else the benefit of being helpful to us. And that actually lifts them up. And we don't think of that. We think of it as a sign of weakness or there's something wrong with us. Reaching out is a wonderful way to connect and help someone else even feel better in helping you or me. So I want to throw that in because it's not something we often think about. I'm sorry, Amy, I didn't.
No, I agree. But reaching out, you're giving when you reach out.
That's right.
And I wanted to share the services, for High Holiday services at Temple Emmanuel, and the way I'm feeling with Temple Emmanuel. I feel closer and more connected with the temple than I've ever felt, as weird as that is. Those High Holiday services, I was with, in my heart, with the people, and I didn't have to feel like there were, I was worried about getting a seat or, all that. And people talking about what other people are wearing or something. It was just spiritual, and it was intentional. Another example, the music neighborhood that I'm the chairperson for, we tried singing together on Zoom, and it just was terrible. It doesn't sync. It sounded so bad. So people,
Doesn't work.
So people weren't going to come back. Then I had a thought. What if we each time have a different person step up and give of themselves, of what they know? Our first one was our unbelievable director, John Nelson. He talked about his band, Yom Hadash, and how he met Rabbi Meyer and the CDs they made. It was so cool. I did the second one, which was called Percussion Discussion, because I like to do percussion, and it's on YouTube. And then we had Judy Takada talk about the difference between the violin, the cello, and the viola. And we're going to have Sue Weiss this month talk about the same song with different melodies. And the following month, Mary Gloss Band is going to talk about harmonies, native harmonies in Alaska and Hawaii and continental US. And John's going to teach us how to harmonize. We're learning more about each other now than we ever did sitting in a group. It's so beautiful. And now, whenever I connect with anyone, whether I'm seeing their face or not, I never see how people look, so it doesn't really matter to me if I see the physical part. But whenever I do speak with someone, I am so grateful that we're alive, that we're here, that we're doing this. It's more than what it used to be. I'm just holding it in my heart and letting it grow and listening, really listening better, I think. Let me know.
I think in the end, what happens when we are forced to be apart, it makes every connection that much more precious and valuable. And so we begin to connect through the disconnection. And this is something that if we practice this, even if we may not be physically in the room, we can be emotionally in the room with another person.
Right on.
We did Passover this past spring at a distance. I have family in California, and everybody was sitting there eating together on Zoom, and it was just fantastic. We prayed together, but we also shared a lot of things and updated as a family in ways that we haven't been able to do in years. Connection is in some ways easier now, but there is something about the hug. We do virtual hugs in the cancer group. We do sounding, notes together. There's all kinds of things, but this ability to see and to hear and to feel, and our intuition doesn't go away at a distance, by the way. Our energetic connections are instantaneous and far-reaching.
There's some very nice comments in the chat also, just for your sharing your experience, Amy. Thank you, precious Amy. Thank you for sharing this heartfelt message. You're an inspiration. So I'll make sure that we can track all those and that you can read them. I have put in the chat for folks the website, which is www.marbleheadcounseling.org. We really do want to let you folks know that we're here and we're available and here for all of you. And Amy, you've been such a great supporter of the Counseling Center, as well as so many organizations that you support and enhance. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I want to say how fortunate we are to have Marblehead Counseling Center here in our community. And during these challenging times, the Counseling Center and those they serve would truly benefit from our financial support. So please consider making a donation of any amount by visiting their website, marbleheadcounseling.org. And sincere appreciation is extended to everyone who's already contributed. And I just thank you all for being here tonight. I love you.
Beautiful, Amy. We love you too.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you so much. And please be safe and be joyful. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.